Well, let's talk about the few things that have changed since COVID. And can you go back and maybe when COVID happened, what are your memories of that time? And then what happened till today? Like if you give us a brief rundown.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, so at that point, Dent was delivering our key person of influence accelerator in Toronto, London, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. And at that point, we'd probably worked with just over 3,000 clients. And then COVID started to build. And of course, like everyone at the start, we were like, this could be a bit scary. I've seen movies about this. And then they started signaling lockdowns, right? You weren't going to be able to kind of meet in groups. We're a quarter of the way through one of our 12-month cohort, sort of start about a month to 6 weeks in. So we got ahead of it. We put out a big email. I guess the good news is because we already had a globally distributed team, we were already like really dialed in and had all the systems for Zoom, had all the systems for Slack. Our community was already semi-digital in the Facebook groups that we were using, etc. So the speed at which we could turn on and had experience with delivering online was like the next day. We didn't really have any kind of operational drag or a culture shock internally. The main issue was just letting our clients know that we were going to be able to do it and do it well, and to kind of trust us as we retooled the process from these like 1 and 2 day live workshops to doing it on Zoom, like literally just having the speaker in front of the camera and do it. And what was great is that everyone loved it, right? In the context of like making it work under adverse conditions, etc. And our experience scores were off the chart. People were getting great results. We delivered a bunch of these within about a 3-week period, not just here, but around the world in our different regions. And everyone was all our clients were super stoked, about, 250 at any given time, all giving stellar feedback on our ability to deliver what they came for on Zoom. This was a paradigm shift for us, because one of the most difficult things about our business model was having to hire venues and fly in speakers and put up banners and have someone to manage the AV and then store all the kit and, all that sort, and do it in multiple cities around the world. There's a significant amount of operational drag in all of that. Not to mention the friction from a customer's perspective of having to like drive in or fly in and park. And in Sydney, it's like $100 for parking and all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of things that were slowing the business down, and instantly it was like all that disappeared. Now, 2 things started happening in parallel. I'm sitting on the loo scrolling through realestate.com, and I just looked at Jindabyne, and there was this monster 7-bedroom chalet, 5 acres, views. I drove down and rented the place the next day, but it ended up being 2 years, because at the same time as us going digital, we realized we were never going back. And so long as I had an internet connection, I could now do what I do from anywhere. Shift number 2 is we could go back to first principles. Like our focus is always very outcome oriented. And so, okay, if the outcome is to produce key people of influence, that have got strong founder-led brands that are able to scale, deliver products globally, resilient to all the shit that was going on, what was a better delivery model? So we totally rebuilt our entire online learning platform. We had the head of digital experience for the Olympics as one of our clients. It's just like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. This is incredible. The content is very similar to what you would remember in terms of the core ideas, like the pitching architecture and the product ecosystem, and all that stuff is like fairly timeless, but the format is very different. So short bursts, 90 minutes, up to 2.5 hours sometimes in a session, achieving one thing, go to market fast, come back, iterate, support, do it again. Come back, iterate, support, do it again. And we kind of sprint that for 10 weeks. Then we'll do 8 weeks on and then 8 weeks off to give people time to execute and get that market feedback before going back again. So really kind of more created this sort of a scrum approach to, production. And so then 1 year, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, a year turned into 2 years in Jindabyne, at which point everything started to turn back on again. And we didn't want to stay in Jindabyne. It's a bit too far away. Like the remote hill tree change, they call it, was great, but not permanent.
when you're seeing this change, you're seeing the delivery change, you're seeing how much that has changed. COVID has changed a few things. Now AI has come along and it's changed a few things. Things that we're not used to doing happened during COVID. And it's a response to something that maybe we don't understand or don't know how to deal with. And I think AI falls into that category with the way things are developed. How do you see us changing as business owners? What do you see are things that we should be paying attention to?
Competition is just getting fiercer, right? My kind of world is mostly around your B2B service business, high-end coaches, trainers, people helpers, people that have often built a business that is to some degree built around their skill set. And so ends up becoming rather reliant on them. They kind of accidentally build themselves into it. And for those businesses and business owners, like, competition is crazy. It used to be going down to your local fishing pond and putting the line in and go fishing and, help some people and all that sort of stuff. Whereas now you've got these businesses that are digitizing and leveraging all these tools and platforms and technology, which is essentially giving them a fishing pole that lets them fish anywhere in the world. So you've got the group of businesses that are doing that and are ahead of the curve and can now fish everywhere in the world. And then you've got the traditional businesses that are kind of still just doing it the old way, that can only fish where they're at. And so you can imagine your fishing hole now has 1,000 different fishing rods, all fishing in it from different places on the planet, competing against you, but you can't necessarily compete back unless you've sort of got in front of that curve. We're seeing businesses that are feeling the pressure of the shift towards more, like, it used to be this real mindset that people want my service, people want my help. But it's like, actually, no, people want an outcome, and people are developing tools and tech and more subscription and software as a service type platforms to deliver those same outcomes. And people are very happily choosing those platforms to deliver those outcomes over the traditional service providers that they may have previously used. And so there's a existential crisis for those business owners that are not, they're somewhat stuck in their ways. They're also just a bit overwhelmed, right? Like, technology and being in front of this stuff isn't their major skill set. And so I think, like, never have I been speaking to more people that are pretty honest about the fact that they recognize that they're standing on the brink of irrelevance. And that's a real thing. There's sort of a sense of urgency that I haven't experienced before from a good chunk of the market. I guess a business perspective, that's the sort of changes that I've seen. And I think, the fear is less AI and machines, enslaving the human race. And I think there's a few people banging that drum. I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I don't think that's what's happening. Human beings have a tendency to freak out.
I have to say, though, while you were talking, the thing that kept thinking about is the compounding effect of being a key person of influence. If you ask ChatGPT, for example, who is Ronsley, it tells you, this guy started the first Australian podcasting conference. And you're like, whoa, this is the compounding effect of publishing regularly and, doing the whole. And I use this a lot. In fact, just the other day, I was in Hawaii talking to someone who met Mike Reed in Canada. And he asked me about key person of influence. And my exact line was, and usually is, I am everything I am because of the key person of influence program, without a shadow of a doubt. So the compounding effect of being a key person of influence, especially in this period, is like massive. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that kind of return as a result of the clients you're dealing with?
Well, so this was the lesson that we learned back in the GFC. Right. So Dan and I started off promoting gurus and building essentially their founders brand. We'd roll out books for them and online quizzes for them and kind of build a bit of that media and a bit of that online presence, etc. Like you said. So when people Googled them, cool stuff showed up, and we put them in front of events and conferences. Now they've got them photos of them in front on their websites, of them in front of thousands of people. It just starts to cascade. They're winning awards, etc. We were behind the scenes, right? We're just running this as a marketing promotional engine. And then the GFC hit, we got hammered. The business went to zero. Not all elements of a business model are resilient to an economic correction, right? Or now a pandemic or a lockdown or any of that kind of stuff. But something that is totally immune to anything that happens in the world is brand. right? I think of brand as just reputation at scale.
Yep.
The moment you can kind of cross that chasm where people that have never met you or anyone you know can get to know you, like you, trust you, right? That is a force multiplier. And that cannot be destroyed by the markets correcting, by industries changing, by technology accelerating. And so we'd experience the ultimate pain of not having that brand reputation, that digital presence, by becoming totally irrelevant. And so then when we looked at, well, what value do we have to offer? How can we create an impact here? We knew how to produce key people of influence, right? We knew how to build those go-to brands. We didn't want to do it for individuals anymore. Small business owners, like exactly you as our avatar, was what they needed more than anything to become resilient. We didn't want to build a guru model, so we approached it like a Y Combinator style accelerator, and kind of away we went. And then, a bit more than 10 years, 12 years later, COVID. And it was kind of like, okay, now we get to see if this new way of building a business with these insights we got from the last drop, if we've actually done them right and we're going to be able to weather this storm. And obviously we did, and then some. And so not only was it a huge validation from our perspective that these principles of building business are resilient and transcend the normal ups and downs, because you're not constrained by time and geography, and you go from synchronous, which is I need to be in the same time, the same place to make things happen, to asynchronous, people can consume the value that I have to offer anywhere, anytime, always. Like, again, that's an infinite shift in the capacity to deliver value, literally infinite. I think trust is going to be at an even greater premium than ever. Like, the people that have the clarity, that have the presence, that have the trust to be able to separate the signal from exponentially more noise, I think are going to be exponentially more valuable.
While you were talking, I was thinking about the AI revolution. This team that I have in the Philippines, their biggest shortcomings can be like given superpowers using AI. Yes. And they 100%. Suddenly become like way more valuable if they're trained to use this or think in this way. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, 100%. We actually took a stake in a VA recruitment and placement company. And, one of our first pieces of advice was to radically commit to training every single one of their team on how to leverage every goddamn possible tool there is. And so they've found a huge shift in their ability to have compelling sales conversations based on that, right? Because it's, again, the business owner sitting there going, I don't have time to be getting onto all these platforms. So to have a human that they can interface with, essentially a temporary surrogate for AGI to interface with, to chat to, who does have access and can set up all these platforms, is huge, right? So it's taking, the value of the output of someone that you might be paying, $15 to $25 an hour for, and you would normally get like $15 to $25 an hour worth of work, perhaps more, right? With a bit of geo arbitrage, et cetera, or income arbitrage, like now getting 10x that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a few things that I want to talk about. Tell me about the podcast. Where is it at? What's it been doing? What kind of results have you seen from having it and doing for
100
few
plus,
years?
yeah. 100 plus episodes. So mid-COVID, we put it on pause. So a few things. Firstly, if I'm very honest, I just got a bit bored with the process, and I examined my objectives, and my goal was to have a layer of material that would help people understand the value of the Key Person of Influence program, right? So there's over 100 interviews with our clients. Each of them, like the minimum has done like a 300% growth. The largest is, sold their company for 100 million. And that was sort of the goal. And I got to 100 podcasts. I'm like, okay, this is good. And, we've got it all organized. When any type of new prospect starts exploring working with us, we can give them like industry specific, a couple of different ones. Like we just had this super abundance. So there was this big tick in my mind, and I never saw myself as a podcaster, right? I didn't start the podcast to be a podcaster. I started the podcast to, I suppose, build the asset to support the business. So then that was happening in one layer. The other layer was, man, we were busy over COVID. So while we navigated it really well, it required required a lot of my attention.
Yep.
And I wasn't in the mood. I was in build mode. And I was just like, you know what? This is ticking the box. I don't see it as a major priority. So I put it on pause. And recently, actually, in the last 2 months, I feel like COVID was like a cocoon process for us. It was like this metamorphosis where we were going through a transformation that some people are only now looking at going through, right? So we're a few years ahead. And now, as a major investor in a super fast growth AI enabled SaaS platform, we're building Dent directly and the KPI accelerator directly into GPT's API, and about to reveal, some pretty cool stuff there. There's definitely a new spark in me around having conversations that are a little bit more relevant to this. And I think it is the friction that comes out of that, open, perhaps uncomfortable debate that creates great democracy, that is the building blocks of a great culture and a great society, and a society that I want to see my daughter grow up and into. And I think the more I can help entrepreneurs and founders get out of survival needs into, like you, being able to influence and make a difference and share ideas. I don't really care what those ideas are, right? Even if they're very different to my own. I just want you to be able to share them and share them well. And the more people doing that in that environment, I think the better the world gets faster.
You mentioned reinvigorated to have conversations. I genuinely believe that artificial intelligence will probably be the biggest conversation of our lifetime. What kind of conversations are you seeing that you want to have on the show?
I'm not the super high tech, like I'm not a coder, I'm not sitting there running Python scripts, based on output from GPT. I'm also not like right into the whole human augmentation, let's become machines as quickly as possible. I'm pretty big on distributed systems, distributed value, localized systems, localized value. So my whole thing is more how to help these traditional businesses stay relevant. That's where I'm most interested. Like, forget all the, the super big complex stuff. On reflection, there's two parts of that. There's like, what is the unique value that I have to offer? And even getting clear on that is a challenge in itself. But it's no good you being clear on the value. You also have to share it with others, right? And ideally in this world at some degree of scale. Like if you were to see like, how am I going to measure my life? For the most part, how to help everyday business owners that are kind of experiencing this existential threat leverage these tools in a way that's not super overwhelming, the way that's really practical, that allows them to take that value and share it with the world, but probably with a pretty radically reimagined business model.
So you mentioned trust. How do you see that changing? And I'd love for you to also talk about Score app and how that fits into the equation of when someone finds out about you and what you do and this gift that you can potentially give the world. How do you get them from when they first find out about you, the know part, to get them to like and trust you in the world we're living in right now, considering where we're at with AI and content?
Trust is a funny thing, right? If you're trying too hard to manufacture it, people can smell that a mile away, right? So it's kind of what I see, at least, is there's this new type of intelligence in the world that doesn't convey the same that doesn't create the same human connection to that information as it would coming from a person. Like you and me having this conversation, even separated via Zoom, like there's a connection, especially because we know each other. right? It's not the same when GPT spits it out. There is a disconnection there, and we can look at it on its own merits, great, but totally suspicious of it. Like, is this right? Is this accurate? Can this help me? And I understand that's going to get better quickly, and over time this will change, and over time I reserve the right to change my perspective. But I think humans have a unique ability to create a human connection with other human beings, and it usually has something to do with their story and their journey and their background and their interests and how that relates. But that person who's living the sort of life I want, I'm like, yeah, I want to learn from that person. That's sitting around the campfire telling stories, learning from people that we're just programmed to bond with, to connect with, dopamine cascade with, all that sort of stuff. I think the people can exude those stories and that connection and those conversations at scale, like leveraging media and technology in these ways, are going to at least for a while, AI's ability to do cool shit. And they will be able to use it as a lever to create more impact, as opposed to being made irrelevant.
How does Score App fit into that? So when you have the audience that comes in,
well, so Score App, so part of everything that we're talking about, another layer of one of the trends is hyper-personalization, right? Hyper-personalization is driven by data and analytics. And, we understand this because we understand that, all of a sudden I'm talking about data and analytics. Magically, I'm going to start getting ads on data and analytic tools coming through my feed, like creepy, right? So we know that the biggest companies in the world are using our own data against us, right? They want us to be consumers. And Score App's entire thesis is that kind of technology shouldn't just be in the hands of the powerful, right? It should be in the hands of everyone. And so when you think about it, what's the common thread? Well, the common thread is they kind of all need to convince people to buy, right? Like there needs to be some kind of a dialogue, a conversation, a needs analysis before someone's going to decide to buy. But for more intangible businesses, there is friction in that process. And that friction is often one of the things that really slows businesses down. So that's one problem. So the premise of Score App, and we kind of came across this somewhat accidentally, but was, so the difference between a quiz and a survey. People often say, oh, we already do surveys. So we built the technology to allow a business owner to create their own quiz, where when their customers or prospects get the quiz, answer the questions, it's able to draw inferences from those questions and provide them with an immediate feedback in terms of, well, here are some strengths and weaknesses, here are some opportunities, here's some low-lying fruit, here's some things to look out for, here are some quick next steps, here's maybe some videos to watch or a group to join or whatever it is. And man, it went off, right? Because like I said at the start, people love, like if people have got a problem they're trying to solve, they love going down the rabbit hole. Like, give me the YouTube, give me the books. Is there a quiz that's going to give me a new perspective? Is there a personality thing I can do that's going to help me with that? Like, whatever it is, great. And so then we started having our clients build them into their books because, if you sell a book on Amazon, well, that's Amazon's lead. Whereas if they open the book and it says, hey, do the quiz and it's going to benchmark you and it'll help you get more out of the book. And then you go and do that. Well, now you've got the lead, right? So, and then you extrapolate that out and you can kind of then use this as a lead magnet across every platform, which people do. And that's what it's built for. It does landing pages and, the whole stack. So where it gets nuts is if you think of sales and marketing, like what's its objective? Well, if we go back to the goal of a business, it's to get someone from where they are to where they want to be as fast as possible, but they're not often aware of the real gap between where they are and where they want to be. So with a series of questions, we can highlight that gap, which is essentially sales and marketing. The more awareness you can bring someone's attention to the gap between where they are and where they want to be, the more tension, the more desire, the more motivation to now resolve that gap, etc. And so this little tool actually accelerates desire, right? Because it gives people a perspective. It takes their blinkers off. They can kind of see the issue in its entirety, but not just that. And this is where the personalization comes in. they've now got great value based on the report they get or the feedback that the system gives them. They're like, this is awesome. Like, you know, laws of exchange are balanced to feel good about this. But we've now got all that data, and we can train now Facebook on that data. We can train Google on that data. We can have our own custom email sequences that are designed to reach out and nurture them based on exactly how they've answered these questions. Score app now has AI wizards to create all those emails, all those social media posts based on how people score, etc. Over time, you collect enough data, it can synthesize that into macro reports and statistics on your market and industry to provide you internal insights, or if you're a thought leader and want to share them externally, all AI generated, right? It just finds the magic and spits it out. So the ability for now a small and micro business owner for like $60 a month to have access to these plug and play. So it helps them build their audience. It helps them manufacture demand. It gives them a global footprint. It gives them access to information that is usually only reserved for, you know, the biggest businesses in the world. And so, you know, punch above their weight a bit.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, scoreapp.com is where you go to find that and all the cool stuff. Well, I can't wait for the Dent podcast to come back online. I thank you and the team.
I appreciate you
for everything. Thank you. Thanks, bro.
Cool, brother. That was awesome. Appreciate having me.
Yeah.